Americans angry right now about the economy.
Sure.
And on Friday, you conceded that Americans are not better off than they were 8 years ago. But the Democrats are launching an ad campaign this week where they're going to try to pin some comments you made during the primaries on you. Take a look.
I think you could argue that Americans overall are better off because we have had a pretty good, prosperous time with low unemployment, low inflation. A lot of good things have happened. A lot of jobs have been created. I think we are better off overall.
Do you feel better off?
The theme is going to be, and you know it, you're out of touch, you just don't get it. How do you respond?
Well, I have an economic plan. It's good. It's strong. Things have gotten worse in the last several months, as we all know, in our economy. Americans are struggling. American families are sitting around the kitchen table today trying to figure out how they're going to keep their home, keep their job. Times are very, very tough. And the worst thing you can do is raise taxes. Both Senator Clinton and Senator Obama want to raise taxes. That's out of touch. That's out of touch. Senator Obama says that he doesn't want to raise taxes on anybody making over $200,000 a year, yet he wants to nearly double the capital gains tax, nearly double it, which 100 million Americans have investment in, mutual funds, 401ks, policemen, firemen, nurses. He wants to increase their taxes, and he obviously doesn't understand the economy because history shows every time you have cut capital gains taxes, revenues have increased, going back to Jack Kennedy. So out of touch, yes, they are out of touch when they want to raise taxes at the worst possible time when we're in a recession. We're going to cut taxes, we're going to reduce spending, we're going to put a freeze on discretionary spending, we're going to make wealthy people pay for their own prescription drugs, we're going to scrub every institution of government and put them out of business.
You know, you just mentioned your plan to have wealthy people means test, increase their Medicare premiums. That's going to hit people, individuals earning about $84,000 a year.
$160,000.
That's for couples for $160,000. How is that different, that premium increase different from a tax increase?
All it does is say that people are going to pay just as they do in the other parts of Medicare that can afford to pay.
But it is an increase.
Should we be paying? It's going to be an increase in their payments. Sure. Why shouldn't we? Would they pay? Why should we be paying for Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or wealthy Americans who are retired making $160,000 a couple not pay for their own prescription drugs?
Your plan will also
when we've got $1 trillion unfunded liability associated with the Medicare prescription drug bill. $1 trillion that we're laying on the next generation of Americans. We don't want to do that.
Your tax plan will also have a lot of benefits for wealthy Americans. You have about $300 billion by your own count of tax cuts a year in your plan. Some say it could be double that, some budget experts. But even by your own accounting, $300 billion a year, that means your previous promise to balance the budget in your first term, that's gone.
No, of course not. Look, I'll find you $100 billion tomorrow.
Wait,
I'll find you
can
$100
balance
billion
the budget in your first term?
We will make long progress towards it. Now, if economic conditions continue to deteriorate, it's going to be harder. But we're going to be on a path to a balanced budget. Look,
but we're not going to have a balanced budget before you leave office in your first term.
Well, that still should be a goal. But the goal right now is get the economy going again. Here's $100 billion right here for you, George. 2 years in a row, last 2 years, the President of the United States has signed into law two big spending, pork barrel laden bills worth $35 billion. That increases the budget, the baseline of the budget. In years before that, $65 billion. You do away with those. There's $100 billion right there before you look at any agency of government.
Let's talk about that then, because you have $300 billion a year in tax cuts by your count, $200 billion a year in spending restraints by your own count. So I think it's hard to see how you're going to get a balanced budget in 4 years. But first, let me just follow up on that. You talk about your earmark.
But could I just finish my thought? You scrub every agency of government. Is there any American that doesn't believe that there's tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that can be saved? I saved the taxpayer $6 billion all by myself on a with a little help from my friends, in the $6 billion on a bogus Air Force tanker
let's
deal.
talk about that, though.
There's hundreds of billions that can be saved, and Americans know that.
Yet you
That's
only
why
claim
they're fed up.
$60 billion a year from your earmark. reforms. Every
I
other
claim $100 billion when you look at $35 billion in the last 2 years and $65 billion in the previous years
sir,
before that.
But sir,
and that,
let me finish the point. Every
sure,
other estimate
sure.
I've seen says that the earmarks are about $18 or $20 billion a year. To get to the 60 you're talking about, that includes an earmark that, like the aid to Israel, $2 billion a year, $1 billion a year for military housing. You're not going to cut those.
I'm going to cut at least that. Look,
Are you cutting aid to Israel?
Of course not. I'm not cutting.
Are you cutting
aid to
military
Israel.
housing?
No, of course not. I am cutting billions and billions out of defense spending, which are not earmarks. The $400 million ship that they had to scrap that was supposed to cost $140 billion. The $30 billion, I believe it is, add-on for a system in the Army that's gone up $30 billion, and we still haven't got any result from it. The $50 million contract to some buddy of Air Force generals. I mean, there's so many billions out there just in defense procurement.
To hit your number, you say $160 billion in discretionary spending. The entire non-defense discretionary budget is $500 billion a year. That means you're talking about a 30% cut in every program. Education, veterans benefits.
I'm talking about looking at every
health,
institution
and you're
of government
prepared to
and
cut
changing
30%?
the way. I'm talking about changing the way we do business in Washington.
But are you prepared
and
to cut 30%?
I am prepared to cut hundreds of billions of dollars out of wasteful and unnecessary spending in America, whether they be ethanol subsidies, whether they be sugar price supports, whether they be payments to the wealthiest farmers, whether they be the loopholes that are out there worth I don't know how many billions and billions of dollars. I guess my critics, and frankly, from the tenor of your questions, think we're going to do business as usual in Washington. We're not.
Senator,
I'm their worst nightmares. I'm their worst nightmare, my friend.
Congress has never made anything close to the kinds of cuts that would be required to get your numbers 30%. So here's my question.
Sure.
If Congress does not give you the spending cuts you say you can get, will you hold off on signing the tax cuts?
No, of course not, because we want to increase people's taxes during a recession. And by the way, when Ronald Reagan came to office, we did restrain spending. It's restraint of
spending. Nothing near 30% in non-defense discretionary.
My friend, we have increased the size of government by some 40% just in the last few years. By some 40%, by trillions.
But
by trillions, we have increased the size of government.
Here's what I don't understand.
So why would you not think that if we stop that increase in the size of government in the form of $1 trillion or so, that we can't balance the budget?
During the campaign, you said that you voted against President Bush's tax cuts because the spending constraints weren't there.
Yes.
Now you say you're going to do tax cuts,
and
even if you don't get the spending cuts. Back in 2001, you said the tax cuts...
And could I respond to that? Because if we increase people's taxes today, which will be a massive tax increase, it'll exacerbate the recession that we're in. And that is a fact, historical fact, that when economies are rough, then you've got to reduce the tax burden on people.
But it seems like you've had an evolving position on tax cuts. 2001, you said the Bush tax cuts violated your conscience. 2003, you said you opposed them because we didn't figure out how to pay for the war yet. 2008, you said you opposed them because there were no spending constraints. Now you're saying it's tax cuts even if the spending cuts aren't there.
Yes.
Basically, no matter what the economic problem is, you say tax cuts are the solution.
Because I can change the way we do business and cut spending. The problem, the difference of opinion that I have here with the experts that you're quoting is that it's not taxes. It's spending that's the problem. And when you look at the growth in the size of government by some 40 in the estimate of some in the last 8 years, the largest, by clearly most experts, the largest increase in the size of government, therefore the largest increase in spending since the Great Society, then guess what? Then obviously we have deficits. So it's the spending that's the problem in my view, not the tax cuts. If you don't make these tax cuts, by the way, at the time also, you forgot to mention, I said the reason why I oppose those tax cuts because there wasn't spending restraint. If we'd have done what I wanted to do, we'd be talking about more tax cuts today.
Let me move on to health care. That could be the biggest difference between you and the Democrats this year. Democrats say your tax credit plan will not come close to covering everyone, and it especially